I do not waste strength explaining myself. I do not argue. I do not seek validation from those who do not understand war. I control the frame, and those outside it scramble to catch up. When a man enters battle trying to be understood, he has already given up the high ground. Words, when wielded by the unprepared, become distractions. They lead him away from the field of formation and into the swamp of reaction. But I do not follow words. I let others chase them, while I remain fixed on the terrain beneath my feet. Because he who controls the frame never has to speak loudly. You may think clarity lies in articulation, but the battlefield teaches the opposite. Clarity lies in positioning. It lies in the silences you choose, in the terms you do not accept, and in the way your presence forces the room to bend around your pace. That is the power of the frame, the invisible perimeter that defines what is spoken, what is silenced, and who is leading. Most people fight over language, over phrasing, over surface definitions. But I fight differently. I shape the reality in which words exist. I give meaning before others speak. When I say nothing, they still react. When I define nothing, they still adjust. Because I have already moved the boundaries of perception, the frame is the arena. He who controls it decides what the conflict is even about. While others get trapped in debate, I have already won by deciding what matters and what doesn't. I build the war on ground of my choosing, and let them exhaust themselves trying to understand the shape of the fight. When you see a man who is calm in the face of chaos, do not be fooled. He is not passive. He is pulling the strings beneath the noise. He is shifting the frame invisibly. He is saying, I will not fight you where you want. I will not speak your words. I will not engage on your terms. You will come to me. Power is not about domination. It's about definition. If you define what the conversation is, you already have control. Others may speak louder, move faster, make bolder claims. But if they are still reacting to the ground you prepared, then they are fighting inside your war, not theirs. You must learn to become this kind of general, not one who rushes forward, but one who expands the frame and watches others fall into it. Let your formation stretch silently beneath the feet of your enemies until they look down and realize the war is being fought in your shadow. A general who cannot control the frame will spend his entire war reacting to someone else's tempo. He will fight where he is told, defend what others accuse, justify what others misunderstand. And in doing so, he abandons his true battlefield, the one within. Control of the frame begins with control of the self. Before you define the outer conversation, you must define your own terms. What matters to you? What mission are you on? What is non-negotiable? Until you are rooted in that internal formation, you will be tempted to explain yourself to everyone, to prove your worth in enemy terrain, where the ground is unstable and the rules are not yours. I have seen great men crumble because they lost the frame. They allowed the enemy to define what winning looked like. They accepted battles that were not strategic, only emotional. They responded to provocations out of pride, not clarity. And when that happens, the war is already lost. Not on the battlefield, but in the positioning of the mind. Let them misunderstand you. Let them call you names. Let them mock your silence. These are the desperate sounds of those who cannot shape reality on their own. Their only power is in baiting you to explain, to leave your fortress of clarity and wander into the swamp of distraction. But a true strategist does not take the bait. He does not chase the noise. He expands his silence until it swallows the noise whole. When you refuse to react, you are not being weak. You are asserting a deeper strength, the strength of defining the boundaries of what you will engage with. Every reaction is a surrender of frame. Every defensive word you utter gives the opponent a chance to redefine your position. But when you remain composed, detached, unshaken, you force them to ask, "What is he thinking?" And in that moment, you have flipped the entire war. Let me give you a lesson from war. The one who speaks less is not always less powerful. Often, he is the one commanding the flow, the one watching, calculating, setting the tempo in silence. Because once you set the tempo, they are no longer speaking freely. They are responding. Every question they ask becomes a trap. Every statement, a clue to their lack of grounding. And you? You remain unmoved because you are no longer in the conversation. You are above it, defining it. People fear being misunderstood. I welcome it, because every misunderstanding is a fog that hides my real strategy. It gives me space, time, silence. While they argue about what I meant, I am already forming the next move. While they try to label me, I am already dissolving the labels. I do not need to win the argument. I need to win the frame. And here lies the paradox. When you stop trying to be understood, others begin to obsess over understanding you. You become a mirror, a void, a mystery, and people fear mysteries more than enemies, because what they cannot define, they cannot control. So remain undefined. Let your actions speak in riddles. Let your pauses unsettle. Let your silence stretch longer than their comfort allows. And you will find they will explain you to themselves in ways more powerful than any words you could ever offer. You control the frame not by speaking, but by shaping the space in which speaking happens. Control is never seized by volume. It is claimed by presence, a presence that bends the atmosphere, not by force, but by unshakable self-definition. The man who knows who he is does not need to defend it. His stillness becomes a command. His silence becomes a mirror. And suddenly, others are adjusting their posture, their tone, their energy, without even knowing why. This is the unseen battlefield. Not the sword and spear, but the terrain of perception, the frame. It is not about winning the argument. It is about making sure the argument takes place in a structure that favors you. If you can control how people think about a situation, you rarely need to control what they do. Their choices narrow naturally, confined within the walls you built while they were distracted by noise. That is why I speak slowly, deliberately. I do not rush to respond, because the one who responds quickly is still following. I pause long enough for the frame to shift, and in that pause, they grow anxious. They reveal more than they intended. They begin to explain things I never asked. And now, without knowing it, they are operating within my formation. This is how power moves without announcement. You do not need to shout when others are already listening. You do not need to justify when others are defending against ghosts. Your control becomes invisible, but total. That is how empires are built, not on noise, but on design. Think of this. When you enter a room, do you feel the need to immediately prove something, to be liked, to explain? That urge is the beginning of frame loss, because in that instant, you are conceding that someone else defines what matters. But when you enter with quiet certainty, grounded in mission, you do not chase approval. You do not explain your presence, and in doing so, paradoxically, people pay more attention. They lean in. They recalibrate. Do not mistake this for arrogance. It is discipline. Discipline of attention. Discipline of energy. The ability to not flinch when misunderstood. the wisdom to let the dust settle without reaching to clear it. Because when the dust clears on its own, and you're still standing, the frame becomes yours by default. That's why in diplomacy, the most powerful men rarely speak first. They let the others declare, posture, reveal. Then, with a single sentence, they recenter the entire table. It is not about who speaks most. It is about who reframes best. And this is not limited to politics or war. In every domain, relationships, business, negotiation, the one who defines the terms owns the terrain. Let me be clear. When you allow others to define the question, you are already halfway to losing the answer. But when you set the question, when you ask in ways that reveal your control, you make them reveal their formation while yours remains hidden. That is strategic asymmetry. They move in straight lines. You move like mist, surrounding, reframing, redefining. In this world, people will try to define you in haste, to box you, to label you. Resist the temptation to respond. Instead, make them question their own labels. Make your silence more strategic than their certainty. And soon, they will come to you, not for validation, but for orientation. Because you do not need to win arguments. You only need to shift the frame in which they happen. In war, the first to strike is not always the first to win. Victory belongs to the one who defines what a strike is. The one who shapes the environment in such a way that even an absence becomes a blow and even silence becomes a sword. When I hold the frame, my opponent becomes confused by my lack of aggression. They expect a charge, a counterattack, a retaliation, but none comes. Instead, I offer space, stillness, time, and in that vacuum, they begin to overthink, to overreach, to explain themselves even when unprovoked. And every word they speak, every move they make, becomes a self-inflicted wound, not because I attacked, but because I defined the space where their own energy would undo them. This is the power of restraint, not weakness, but total control over the rhythm of the battlefield. By refusing to match their tempo, I force them to match mine. By refusing to follow their logic, I force them to chase mine. And this is how they lose, not in a moment, but across a sequence of misalignments, set in motion by my refusal to speak on their terms. The frame is a form of warfare far more subtle than brute force. And because it is invisible, most do not recognize it until it is too late. They think they are still fighting, when in fact, they are already being directed. Their strategies are responses. Their energy is a reaction. Their movements are a dance around a center they no longer control. Let me tell you what I've learned from watching powerful men collapse. The first mistake is never tactical. It is perceptual. They allowed someone else to decide what mattered. They chased victory without asking, victory by whose rules? They defended honor without asking, whose definition of honor? And they attacked first, not because it was time, but because they felt pressure from an enemy-defined clock. But I do not rush. I do not defend. I do not explain. I let others reveal themselves. I let time reveal alignment. I let pressure expose those who lack grounding. And then, once the frame is fully mine, only then do I move. The strongest generals never win battles. They remove the need to fight them. And this too applies to life far beyond war. In conversation, the one who speaks least often controls the direction. In relationships, the one who remains composed defines the emotional range. In business, the one who decides the terms of engagement, not the loudest, holds the leverage. When you argue for your value, you make it negotiable. But when you embody it, and make others feel it through your stance, your absence, your clarity, then even your silence becomes expensive. So here is what I tell my students. Your words do not carry power if your presence has no weight. First, become someone whose frame is unshakable. Then, let your silence speak for you. The world will adjust, or it will try to break you. But either way, you will not chase words. You will not fight for attention. You will not step outside your formation. You will stand where the frame is strongest and let them walk into it. Most people lose because they accept the terms too early, not the terms of surrender, but the terms of discussion, of evaluation, of worth. They walk into rooms and accept the frame laid out for them, the metrics, the titles, the expectations, and in doing so, they begin the battle one step behind. But I was not trained to step into other men's formations. I was trained to recognize when a battlefield has already been drawn and to either redraw it or walk away. There is no honor in fighting a war on terms that favor your enemy. There is only exhaustion. That is why I prefer positioning over persuasion. I would rather take the higher ground than shout from the valley. I would rather move in silence than beg for agreement. Because once you gain elevation, once you control the terrain, others will shift around you without needing to be convinced. You've seen this. In every room, there is a person who says little, but whose presence shapes the air, not because they demand attention, but because they do not chase it. They are aligned internally. They are not there to perform. They are there because they have something to protect, a mission, a standard, a code, and that weight creates gravity. Others feel it. Words without formation are noise. But when your presence is shaped by purpose, your words, few as they may be, become signals, markers. Even your silences take on meaning. This is what I mean when I say, control the frame. You must become the one who defines what is being measured, what matters, what doesn't. You must unhook your value from external reaction, from applause, from judgment. Because the moment your sense of power becomes reactive, it is no longer yours. You do not need to be loud to be undeniable. You do not need to explain to be respected. Those who command true presence often say the least, not out of fear, but because they know most words are wasted. Most arguments are invitations to step out of position, and most praise is a currency of control. So I will teach you a different economy, one where silence is wealth, stillness is leverage, and presence is power. Walk into rooms with the quiet of someone who knows exactly what they carry. Let others interpret your silence however they wish. Their guesses are their own burden. You have no obligation to correct them. Because while they speak to define you, you are already observing, reading formation, calculating leverage, testing tension. And if you choose to act, to speak, it will not be out of compulsion. It will be with precision, with force, with meaning. And that strike, that single phrase or gesture, will shift the entire dynamic, because it came not from insecurity, but from alignment, from stillness, from a man who never left his formation. That is control, not over others, but over the space between their noise and your clarity. I have seen kingdoms lost because a single man reacted to an insult. I have seen leaders abandon decades of preparation because someone questioned their ego. And I have seen entire armies falter, not from lack of strength, but from lack of frame. Understand this. Most battles are lost before the first sword is drawn. They are lost in moments of emotional compromise. In the instant, you feel the need to explain yourself to those who do not move from principle. In the second, you chase being seen rather than staying grounded in what you know. Let them speak first. Let them project. Let them label you. Their rush is their tell. Their need to define is the admission that they cannot sit in uncertainty. But you will become master of the undefined. You will be patient inside the fog. You will let them write the script, only to tear it silently apart by simply not playing your role. Because power is not always in action. Sometimes it is in refusal, in restraint, in quiet strength that rewrites the emotional weather of a room. The one who cannot be provoked cannot be controlled. The one who does not explain cannot be reframed. And the one who does not chase applause cannot be manipulated by it. When you control the frame, you are not at war with others. You are at war with temptation, the temptation to defend, to clarify, to please. And when you win that war, others will feel it. They will say you are intimidating, mysterious, cold. Let them say it. Their confusion is proof that your power is not accessible to them. But it is not cruelty. It is design. Because you do not seek domination. You seek alignment. You are not here to prove anything. You are here to execute a strategy. And if others cannot see it, that is not your burden. You are not a mirror for their comfort. You are a blade for your mission. And when your mission is clear, you will notice this strange reversal. The less you try to be understood, the more people try to understand you. The less you push, the more they pull. You become the gravity. You become the context. You become the quiet standard by which noise is judged. This is why I never speak in haste, why I pause longer than necessary, why I do not rush to fill silence with certainty, because uncertainty is not my enemy. It is my terrain, and the longer I hold it, the more others reveal. There is no victory in being louder. There is only exhaustion. But there is infinite leverage in becoming the one they cannot quite pin down, the one whose silence makes others listen more closely, the one whose presence reframes the very meaning of the moment. So do not speak just to clarify. Let them sit in misinterpretation. Let them feel your boundaries, not through words, but through the weight of your stance, the stillness of your refusal, the elegance of your quiet control. Because the war is not in what you say, it is in what you refuse to make small enough to explain. There is a kind of war waged in every conversation, a subtle conflict, not of words, but of context. Two men may be speaking calmly, even kindly, but underneath, there is a struggle. Who sets the frame? Who defines what is acceptable, what is urgent, what is true? And often, the one who loses this war never notices it happening. He believes he is being respectful, cooperative, reasonable. But all the while, he has conceded the most critical ground, the authority to define reality. I do not enter that war unconsciously. Every word I allow is part of a larger structure. Every silence I hold is a fortress. When I speak, it is not merely to communicate, it is to position, to sculpt the field so subtly that my opponent walks where I want before he even sees the walls closing in. Most people want to be right. I want to be unshakable. I do not need to win arguments. I need only to remain aligned. Because when you stay rooted in your own clarity, your mere presence makes others recalibrate. Their eyes begin to shift. Their tone softens. They second-guess themselves, not because you imposed anything, but because you withheld. That is the power of not explaining. You see, explanation is often an apology in disguise, an unconscious attempt to gain back approval you never should have needed. And when you give in to that urge, when you break your stance to reassure, to smooth things over, to be understood, you shrink yourself. You let their confusion redefine your clarity. You abandon the higher ground to accommodate the emotions of those who never asked what you stand for. But if your clarity is real, it will not need wrapping paper. It will not need explanation. It will transmit without translation. This is not about being cold. It is about being sovereign. Because the moment you begin explaining to people who are not listening to understand, only to react, you have stepped into their chaos. And chaos does not negotiate. It consumes. I have learned this from battle, from politics, from silence. The one who keeps his formation intact while others splinter in noise, that man holds the kingdom. And that's what you are building. Not a conversation, not a momentary win, but a kingdom of mental sovereignty. A place inside you that no misunderstanding can touch. A clarity so strong, it doesn't need defense. A vision so precise, it becomes contagious. Eventually, others will adopt your frame without knowing it. They will echo your tempo. They will use your language. They will conform to your silence. Not because you asked them to, but because your presence gave them no alternative. That is the highest form of control, when you no longer need to assert it. When the field bends around your stillness. When your words become markers in a territory you've already claimed. So practice saying less. Practice holding tension without dissolving it. Practice letting them reach for definitions you've already surpassed. Because true power does not clarify itself. It watches others struggle to do so. In war, the weak reveal themselves by how quickly they react. They spring to defend, to clarify, to win back face. But the strong do something unnerving. They stay still. They do not enter the chaos. They let it swirl, let the noise reach its peak, and only when the dust settles do they take a single step. And that step, because it is deliberate, because it is rare, shifts everything. That is the discipline you must cultivate. The ability to remain motionless when your ego screams to act. The wisdom to watch when others demand you speak. Because in that pause, in that rare, controlled space between pressure and response, you gain an edge no force can fabricate. Let me give you a lesson few generals teach. If the enemy cannot read your posture, they cannot prepare. If they cannot define your terms, they cannot trap you. You become a question that rewrites the strategy itself. And in that confusion, they stall. In that hesitation, they show weakness. And that is when you move. But your movement must come from alignment, not reaction. You must know your own standard so well, it cannot be pulled out of you by insult or praise. You must carry a clarity so cold and so complete that the room feels it before you speak. This is the power of frame. It makes others feel your structure before you explain it. When I walk into negotiations, I carry this silence with me like armor. I do not need to flex. I do not need to correct. I only need to exist in full coherence. And coherence has a strange effect. It forces contradiction to shrink. It silences false confidence. It draws out truth without confrontation. You don't have to point out every misstep when your very presence reveals it. You don't have to respond to provocation when your unresponsiveness forces others to reflect. There will be times when people will misunderstand your silence as weakness. Let them. That misunderstanding is your ally. For while they underestimate, you position. While they overextend, you prepare. And by the time they realize their error, the frame has closed like a gate around them. That is why you must train to feel no urgency in explaining yourself. The moment you act from urgency, you have given the tempo to them. You've stepped out of your formation and into their improvisation. And improvisation, without alignment, is a weapon that cuts its wielder first. Remain a mystery. Not to be mysterious, but to protect your clarity. Because clarity, kept inside, forms pressure. Pressure shapes gravity. And gravity makes others orbit you, even when they think it is their own decision. If they chase your words, let them. If they try to define you, let them try. But never break formation to correct them. Your stillness will reveal everything in time, because in the end, the war is not between you and them. It is between you and the pull to explain, to perform, to prove. And when you win that war, no battlefield will ever frighten you again. In every field, from the battlefield to the boardroom, from personal conflict to global negotiation, there is an unseen current pulling men away from themselves. That current is the hunger to be understood. It sounds noble. It sounds human. But it is one of the most dangerous addictions of the undisciplined mind. Because when your identity depends on being understood, you will explain yourself to the wrong people. You will exhaust yourself, clarifying your intentions to those who never intended to listen. You will hand over your power, one well-crafted sentence at a time. But I do not seek to be understood. I seek to remain aligned. That is the fundamental difference between a leader and a pleaser. The leader speaks to shift terrain. The pleaser speaks to protect perception. And the more you try to manage how others see you, the further you drift from how you see yourself. You must ask yourself, would I rather be understood or unshakable? Because you cannot have both. Not in a world where most people define others by their own fears. If you want to remain clear, you will be misinterpreted. If you want to remain true, you will be labeled. If you want to remain in frame, others will call you cold, arrogant, distant. Not because you are any of those things, but because your silence confronts their chaos. Do not adjust. Do not dilute. Do not descend into their explanations. Stand. Watch. Let them reveal themselves through their questions while you conserve your answers. This is not passive. This is not apathy. It is the highest form of control, when you choose what deserves a response and what does not. Because when everything gets a response, nothing is strategic. And a man who cannot control his words cannot control his war. You will feel this tension most when your silence is tested. When the world pokes at you, accuses you, misquotes you, and inside, your ego will rise, wanting to set the record straight. But let it pass. Let the storm move through without moving you, because your record is not set by noise. It is carved by outcome. Let your results speak. Let your consistency form the pattern. Let your posture be the rebuttal. Because in the end, even your enemies will concede to your control, not because you beat them in argument, but because you never left your position. I do not win because I'm the best speaker. I win because I refuse to be dragged into definitions I didn't choose. I've watched entire campaigns crumble because a single man tried to correct perception instead of staying with strategy. I've seen great talents burn out because they couldn't handle being misunderstood for a season. But seasons pass, and clarity remains. If you can outlast misunderstanding without letting it poison your formation, you will be rare. And the rare are always remembered. So practice this every day. Hold the frame longer than is comfortable. Let silence stretch further than they expect. Watch what happens when you say nothing, and yet everything shifts in your favor. That is the art of power without display. The discipline of letting the world chase your words while you command the meaning. There will come a moment, not once, but many times, when you are standing in a room and everything in that room will try to pull you out of position, not with weapons, not with force, but with suggestion, with provocation, with praise disguised as permission, and criticism disguised as concern. In that moment, remember this: the man who controls the frame controls the room, even if no one knows it yet. They may not look at you. They may speak over you. They may laugh, dismiss, or even ignore. Let them. You are not there to be seen. You are there to decide what will be remembered. And when the noise fades and the decisions remain, they will trace the pattern back to you. Not because you demanded attention, but because you moved with quiet accuracy inside your own formation. You see, the strategist does not fight for attention. He waits for the field to tilt. He moves only when he can do so without flinching, without bending, without apology. Every step he takes is a message. Every pause is a negotiation, and every silence is an assertion. There is nothing louder than a man who doesn't need to raise his voice. You must train your presence to carry your intent. You must enter spaces already decided within yourself. You must be the one who sets the rhythm, even if the world around you seems faster, louder, flashier. Because the ones who move fast do not always move first. And the ones who speak most do not always speak last. Control the frame, and you will find that you no longer need to win arguments, because others will begin to echo your language without knowing it. They will call your silence discipline, your distance mystery, your refusal focus. And in time, they will adjust their posture in your presence. Not because you asked, but because you define the space in which asking becomes unnecessary. That is legacy. That is leverage. That is power. So do not fear being misunderstood. Fear being molded. Do not fear being underestimated. Fear being unaligned. And never, never explain your silence to those who weaponize confusion. Let them chase your words across empty terrain while you guard the fortress of meaning. You do not need to convince the world. You only need to stay in formation long enough for the world to come looking. Because in the end, it is not noise that defines you, but your ability to remain calm within it. Not the spotlight, but your refusal to dance for it. Not the argument, but your capacity to build a world so clear that others cannot enter without adapting. Control the frame. Let them chase the words.